Hello, everybody. Welcome into another episode of the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I am Ryan Wormley, joined as I am every Friday morning by Andrew Erickson and Derek Brown. DBro, this whole show is going to be about the Ravens, right? I mean, we finally have a Victory Friday here I get to talk about.
Yeah, they looked so good last
the
night.
Second half, they looked so good. First half, pretty ugly. Erickson, what did you think about watching that game?
I mean, well, once we finally got some players healthy on the field, it was helpful. And obviously I was tilting my face off when Cade Otton's touchdown came off the board, and then they missed him just for another touchdown, and the 10-point lock did not come to fruition. So very sad about that.
The Ravens got good news before the game. They're like, oh, we're going to get Gus Edwards back on the field after not practicing all week. And Mark Andrews, and Rashad
None of them
Bateman.
finished the game.
None of them finished the game. So that was not super fun for me. Hopefully they can heal up here in this mini bye. Let's make sure everybody can find the three of us online. DBro's Twitter handle is at DBro_FFB. Erickson is at Andrew Erickson _. I can be found at Ryan Wormley. And of course, we can all be found everywhere at Fantasy Pros. I also want to take a second to tell everybody about the Betting Pros podcast. If you're into sports betting, then I urge you to check out our Betting Pros podcast. Every week, Matthew Friedman, Thor Nystrom, Scott Bogman, Joe Pisapia, and others bring you the analysis on players, teams, coaching habits, and trends that you need to make the most informed bets. With great insight, a touch of humor, and strong, diverse guests, we guide you through each week in the NFL and college football and shed light on what the best bets are and how you can take advantage of the market's movement. You can check out our Betting Pros podcast at bettingpros.com/podcast or wherever you listen to your podcast. And also, just if you're like a fantasy fan, I mean, hearing those conversations on player props and things like that can help you make informed decisions with fantasy as well. The bye week teams this week are Chiefs and Chargers, so two very good offenses, but thankfully only two teams that we're missing out on this week. Let's jump right into it, guys. Game number one, another Sunday London game here, and it's the Broncos and Jags, so not the most exciting. Erickson, what's the key matchup here?
Yeah, we got a Nathaniel Hackett revenge game and a healthy Russell Wilson. Let's ride. But my key matchup I'm looking at here is Travis Etienne against the Broncos run defense. So Etienne is fully taken over the Jaguars backfield, 86% opportunity share in week 7, ranked top 5 at the running back position with James Robinson, now a New York Jet. You're looking at Etienne as a bell cow for the remainder of 2022. Now, what does it mean here in week 8? You look at the Broncos defense, been pretty good against running backs, but have given up explosive plays. 7th in yards per carry, allowed 8th in targets per game to opposing running backs. So you're feeling great about Etienne as a fantasy RB1, top 10, top 8 guy based on his explosiveness and the fact that he's going to see a massive workload in this game. Looking at Etienne in terms of next-gen stats this year, 2nd in rushing yards over expectation per attempt this season. He's ripping off big runs left and right. And honestly, he's left so much production on the table. He should have more touchdowns. He should have more catches. So if he can deliver on the opportunity he's getting, he's going to blow up this week.
So you and I talked on the Sunday show, Erickson, about, and this was before the James Robinson trade, about how he's a borderline, a borderline RB1 rest of the season, maybe a high-end RB2. He's still RB16 in our consensus rest of season rankings. Even after the trade, that seems too low to me, right?
Yeah, it's way too low. Yeah, it's definitely way too low.
DBro, where would you have Etienne rest of season?
He's got to be an RB1. I'm pulling on my rest of the season rankings, but I mean, there's no way and this is something we've talked on the podcast previously, guys, down the stretch, we want fresh legs. We want these young guys that can carry you to titles. That's Etienne. It was sadly Breece Hall. It's Dameon Pierce. All of these upside backs, Kenneth Walker, that down the stretch, these teams, that they're going to lean on these guys. These are the horses you want to ride. See how I went with the Broncos and the horses? Okay. God, I even rendered myself speechless with that bad pun. But
just give me your key matchup in this game.
There's nothing I can come back from that, except it's Courtland Sutton weeks. So let's fly. Courtland Sutton versus the Jacksonville secondary. I can't stop. I won't stop. Unfortunately, Courtland Sutton, I think, is a strong wide receiver too, as bad as Russell Wilson has been. And I know supposedly he's going to play this game. He's been doing lunges, jumping jacks on the plane while all the players are trying to sleep. Yes, that's apparently what Russell Wilson does. He is going to fuel Courtland Sutton to a really strong outing. Look, Courtland Sutton still has almost a 25% target share. going against the Jacksonville secondary, who Tyson Campbell, we'll see if Shaquille Griffin comes back, but Trey Herndon has not been good. I think that, look, you see the Jacksonville secondary 20th in explosive pass rate allowed since week 5. This is all up Sutton's alley. So volume, opportunity, and the matchups are going to be there. I think Sutton is going to have a really good game.
Getting into the main slate here, first game up, Panthers at Falcons. DBro, what's the key matchup?
Well, now that we can move on from my bad Russell Wilson jokes, I think that DJ Moore is going to build off of last week's really good game, especially considering Atlanta is going to be rolling out backup corners. AJ Terrell is out. Casey Hayward is out. So, who is DJ Moore going to feast against? 73% of his routes are going to be against Cornell Armstrong and Darren Hall. If you haven't heard of those names, it's fine. Just know that they're not good corners. DJ Moore with his 45% target share last week. Again, I'm above ECR on him this week. I've got him as a strong wide receiver 2, a top 20 wide receiver. I think, look, if Carolina, outside of them wanting to run the ball ad nauseum with Foreman and whoever else is active, I think DJ Moore is going to be a massive cog if they win this game.
Not to just throw him under the bus when he's not even on the show, but DBro, Erickson, Fitz, and Friedman all have DJ Moore as a wide receiver 2 this week. Joey P has him as a wide receiver 4 in his rankings. So very different there. I'm not sure what he's thinking. Obviously, Moore looked good for the first time this year. PJ Walker does like to throw him the ball. He's going up against a terrible pass defense, like you mentioned. So a chance here that despite all the jokes and frustration that we've talked about with DJ Moore all season long, might be a bit of a turnaround here, especially with just how many targets he's going to command with no CMC. Erickson, what are you looking at?
Yeah, I wish I could come on the show and talk about, Drake London, Kyle Pitts, how they're going to take advantage of the Panthers. But no, because the Atlanta Falcons don't throw the ball. So I'm going to have to talk about the Atlanta run game against the Panthers run defense. So Carolina is facing the 6th most rushing attempts this season. But interestingly enough, they rank 1st in run defense EPA. So I think that their stats against the run are a little bit overblown. I think they're a little bit underrated. So I don't think maybe we'll see the Falcons run as effectively as they hope to. Looking at the backfield for the Falcons, Tyler Allgeier, the rookie, rushed 16 times for 50 yards and 1 score last week, and he outtouched Caleb Huntley by 10 touches. He also saw 3 carries inside the 10-yard line. So Allgeier is really the only running back I feel like you can really trust from the Falcons backfield. He doesn't catch passes because, again, the Falcons don't throw the ball, but Allgeier did hit a season high in snaps last week at 62%. He's totaled 15-plus carries for 2 consecutive weeks. So I think that even in a so-so matchup against the Panthers, it's a game where the Falcons can feed Allgeier because it should be pretty close just based on the spread and the fact that the Falcons are one of the most run-heavy teams in the NFL. So volume alone should get Allgeier into the RB2 conversation.
Not to hijack your pick, but Erickson, I want to ask DBro about Kyle Pitts because I asked you on Sunday night, at what point is this thing going to become an actual situation where you can drop him, which seems just an absurd thing to suggest for a guy that talented that you spent so much draft capital on. But DBro, I want to ask you that. I know that you love Drake London and Kyle Pitts, but at what point, if this keeps happening, are they considered droppable?
I mean, I think in redraft circles, unless you're in keeper leagues, you can drop both of them. It's sad to say, but Drake London, I mean, what has it been since week 3? He hasn't been a top 36 wide receiver. Kyle Pitts has basically been living in the doldrums of low end or tight end 2 territory. They're just not getting volume, guys. Like, we talk about volume as king in fantasy. Well, you can't wear the crown at any position if you don't get targets. Doesn't matter how good you are. So it pains me to say this, but yeah, Kyle Pitts and Drake London in redraft, they're both droppable. And now I'm going to go cry.
Yeah, I think we all are. Let's get into our next game, which is also our first pick in the over-under challenge. The over-under game is sponsored by No House Advantage, who are giving away $10,000 in weekly and season-long prizes, including a grand prize of $3,000. Check them out today at nohouseadvantage.com or download the app on the app stores. Use promo code PROS at sign up for a first deposit match up to $50. Our first over-under challenge of the day is Justin Fields over or under 17 fantasy points against the Cowboys. So be on the lookout for that as the guys share their picks for Fields and also some of their other favorite over-unders from this week's challenge throughout the show, which listeners can find at fantasypros.com/challenge. But for now, let's turn to Erickson for his key matchup in Bears-Cowboys.
Yeah, before I preview this Cowboys run game against this Bears run defense, I will give my pick with the Justin Fields over-under challenge. I'm actually going to go under on his prop of fantasy points. I just think that it was the perfect storm for Justin Fields against the Patriots. They're a team that's traditionally struggled against mobile quarterbacks. The Bears had extra time to prepare for the Patriots because they were coming off a Thursday night game. So I think that they took a big advantage of that. They were able to add more wrinkles to the run game. The Patriots said after the game that they had seen plays that they had never seen before, that they weren't ready for. So I think that the Cowboys are going to be much more prepared. The Cowboys have a better defense overall than the Patriots. And I think that the Chicago Bears offense is in for a rude awakening here on Sunday. So I'm going to take the under on Justin Fields. Now, for my key matchup, going back to the Cowboys run game, Tony Pollard, I expect to really be the main guy here with Ezekiel Elliott dealing with a knee injury. Now, at this time, we don't know if Zeke is going to play or not. We've seen mixed reports saying maybe he's already out, and we've seen saying, oh, he's a warrior, he's going to play. I really just hope that he doesn't play. It would make way more sense in the world because Ezekiel Elliott, the Cowboys have a bye week in week 9. So it's like, guys, why are you putting him out there against the Bears run defense that has been absolutely atrocious this season, allowing the league's highest touchdown rate on the ground, 67%, along with the second most rushing yards overall. So knowing that you have a bye week in week 9, just feed Tony Pollard. I don't see, it's not complicated. And over the last 2 weeks, we've seen Tony Pollard be more involved in this offense. He's had basically a 50-50 split in terms of opportunities in this backfield. Last week, he ran a route on 50% of the dropbacks, out-snapped Zeke 65% to 49%. So I just want to see Tony Pollard with this full workload. I think that we will get that. Even if Zeke is active, I have no problem ranking Tony Pollard in the top 12. If Zeke is ruled out, Tony Pollard's a top 3 running back this week.
Yeah, you mentioned all the Zeke injury stuff. We have multiple sort of injury experts that contribute to Fantasy Pros. I just spoke with Dr. Chow last night at Pro Football Doc on Twitter, who said that he is not expecting at all to see Zeke before the bye week and that this is maybe a 3 or 4 week thing. And Deepak, who you and I talk with Sport Med Analysis, Erickson, every Sunday night, also tweeted out a similar thing, 3 to 4 weeks. So that seems to be sort of the consensus from the injury community that this is not something that we should expect to see him on Sunday. As of the time we're recording this, we don't have any sort of definitive information, but I think we should probably operate under the assumption that he won't play. And if that is the case, what would you have Tony Pollard at?
I mean, I'd probably put him RB3. Behind Barkley and Derrick Henry. I probably just can't rank him over Derrick Henry because Derrick Henry's playing the Texans. I probably can't move him out of the number 1 spot, as we'll get into. So probably as high as 2 is probably I could move him, but 3 seems right.
DBro, how about you?
Yeah, I think I don't disagree with Erickson here right now, and I've just updated my ranks to account for that. I don't think that Ezekiel Elliott plays. Right now, I have Tony Pollard at RB4. The only RBs that I have above him are Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, and Kenneth Walker. So, and the Kenneth Walker rank might sound spicy to people. If it does sound spicy to you, you have not seen the Giants' run defense.
All right, well, save that for later in the show. Give me your key matchup for Bears-Cowboys.
Yeah, so look, I'm actually going to take the over on Justin Fields' points at 17 for the over-under challenge for no S advantage. And this is because, look, the Cowboys are bottom 10 in explosive run rate. I think that Justin Fields, they are cooking up more design runs. We're seeing him scramble more. But I think also he's going to get it done through the air. And this is all on the back of Darnell Mooney, who with Jordan Lewis now on the IR is going to face a backup slot corner in Deron Bland. And if you, again, we're talking about cornerbacks. If you don't know them, it's probably because they're not very good. Darnell Mooney since week 4. And if people, and I threw this out on social media, if you're looking for a buy low wide receiver, go get Mooney. Since week 4 with no touchdowns, he has been the wide receiver 29. He has surpassed 50 receiving yards and seen 5 or more targets in each game. He's 27th in raw target volume, and he's top 25 in yards per route run and PFF receiving grade. Now going against a backup slot corner, and Darnell Mooney is going to run about 60% of his routes from the slot. I think he's going to have a fantastic game, and I think that's going to fuel Justin Fields to hit the over here.
A couple of notes before we move on from this game. Justin Fields on that over-under. He is QB4 across the last 3 weeks in fantasy scoring. So he has been getting at least 17 points in each of those games. And then I also want to mention, apparently just a few minutes ago, I'm seeing this on Twitter, Mike McCarthy said that Zeke is improving, maybe even better than they thought from the start of the week. This is from @ToddArcher on Twitter. If Elliott practices Saturday, he would have a chance to play, is what the tweet says. So just definitely keep an eye on that. But it has seemed unlikely for most of the week to date. Let's move to game number 4, Dolphins at Lions. DBro, what's the key matchup?
I really hope Zeke does not play. Good Lord.
I think we all hope
that. I mean, but moving on to the Dolphins and Lions, Raheem Mostert, and I could cap this off and end all of this analysis just saying, look, he's playing the Detroit Lions. You got to start this guy. But I think if the Dolphins, not only are they going to have their way through the air, but I think Raheem Mostert's in for a day. Since week 4, the man is almost averaging 90 total yards per game. He is 23rd in PFF elusive rating, and now he takes on a Detroit Lions team that is 31st in rushing yards per game. They're 30th in EPA per rush, and they're 31st in explosive run rate. So while Raheem Mostert might not be young, he's still getting it done, guys, and he's still got juice, and he's still top 10 in breakaway runs. So I think Raheem Mostert is going to rip off multiple long runs in this game. I've got him flirting with top 12 status on the week.
He's 21st rest of season. I think some of that is just the natural injury history being baked in. If I guaranteed you health, where do you think he should be rest of season, D-Bro?
That's way too low. I mean, look, for me, I think, and the part of this comes down to, Ryan, like, has anybody looked at Raheem Mostert's rest of season schedule? It is awesome. So right now I've got Raheem Mostert. Let me see, where is he in my rest of season rankings? I've got Raheem Mostert as RB 17. Where's ECR at again?
21.
Yeah, I mean, and I honestly could go a little bit higher than this, but it's hard to push him above guys like DeAndre Swift, Kamara, Aaron Jones, that nature of guys. But I mean, if you look at the rest of his schedule, it's mouthwatering, man.
Erickson, I know you and I have talked a lot about just the injury history is naturally baked in here. Where would you have him rest of season if I guarantee health?
I mean, I have him as RB25 because I've just seen this before. Like, if I had to bet on him being healthy for that stretch of really favorable matchups, I would bet that he's not. And that's a reason why Chase Edmonds has been dropped basically in every single fantasy league. You got space, stash him. Because if Mostert goes down, I mean, they could turn to Myles Gaskin, but chances are Chase Edmonds could end up being a league winner when it's all said and done, even after he's been written off. So just kind of something to keep in mind as you're looking for stashes. But, I mean, if I could guarantee health, yeah, I think that he's definitely a top 20 running back.
Good Lord. His schedule, and just to give people context out there, he gets, after the Lions, this is the run defenses he gets. The Bears, the Browns, the Texans. Okay, the 49ers are yikes. The Chargers. Okay, the Bills, not great.
That's pretty perfect.
Then he gets the Packers. Then he gets the Patriots and the Jets. Like, this is the type of schedule where league winners are made, man.
After those first 3. I mean, those might be the 3 worst in the entire league. That's pretty incredible.
It's mouth-watering. So yeah, I don't disagree with Erickson. Like, if you don't believe Mostert can stay healthy, go stash Edmonds, go stash Gaskin. One of these guys is going to carry people, whether it's Mostert or who have you, to titles, because this type of schedule is insane down the stretch.
And this is the time of year where you really should start looking at end of season schedules for guys when you're trying to make trades or sneaky pickups, because we are going into week 8, as crazy and sad as it is to say, we're basically halfway through the fantasy season so far. If you're in a position where you're going to be in the playoffs, schedule, and we now know more about these defenses. Obviously, injuries can always change things, but this is the time that you should start thinking about that as more of a factor. Erickson, what's your key matchup in this one?
Yeah, I'm looking at Amon-Ra St. Brown against the Miami secondary. Looking at the Dolphins, they've been ranked bottom 10 in terms of receiving yards, catches, and targets allowed to wide receivers this season. And St. Brown is the primary part of this Detroit Lions passing game. I know he's been banged up over the last couple of weeks. He did not complete week 7 after leaving with a head injury, but the coaching staff said they did not suffer a concussion, and it was just a head injury, and it was because of the new protocols that kept him out. So I do expect him to suit up here, and I think that he can take advantage of a Miami Dolphins defense. They're ranked 6th in yards after the catch allowed this season. St. Brown ranks 12th in yards after the catch per game and 19th in yards after the catch per reception. And let's keep in mind, like when he's on the field and running routes, Jared Goff is peppering him with targets. 33% target rate per route run for Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's my number one trade for target before this week because Jameson Williams, like they're talking about him, he's still like a month away. And if the Lions are 1-9, 1-10, do you think they're really going to try to get this guy back on the field? I don't think so. So I think it's the St. Brown show from here on out. And this is the one time I think you can still buy him.
Let's move to Cardinals at Vikings. Erickson, what's the key matchup there?
Looking at Kirk Cousins against this Cardinals pass defense. I think that Kirk Cousins is actually in for a very productive passing game here. So looking at Arizona, they've allowed nearly 1 receiving touchdown per game to opposing tight ends. So I like that for Irv Smith, while they also rank overall bottom 10 in terms of passing touchdown rate given up. Arizona's been better against the run this season, second best in rushing defense EPA. Just kind of looking from a scoring perspective. When they give up scores, it's through the air and not through the ground and that's why they rank 4th worst in terms of pass defense EPA and dead last in yards after the catch allowed to everyone, to all the wide receivers and tight ends and pass catchers. Kirk Cousins this year has really dialed back the deep attempts. He's not targeting the ball downfield. He's really checking it down with a more quick passing game. I was actually surprised by this. He ranks 35th in average depth of target this year. Justin Jefferson ranks 2nd in yards after the catch per game. So I know that DBro had mentioned on a podcast we recorded earlier this week how the blitz is going to be something that Kirk Cousins has struggled against. But I think how they mitigate that is through a quick passing game. So if they are bringing heat, I think Cousins is going to be getting at the ball quick because that's really been the recipe for success against this Arizona defense. So I think that Cousins is going to be very productive today. This is a game I like for DFS for stacking purposes. I think Kirk Cousins is a very strong start. I have him in my top 6 quarterbacks this week.
DBro, do you agree with that sort of game plan that you expect to see from Cousins?
I mean, look, if the Vikings are going to have success through the air, I don't disagree with Erickson at all. And my worries are with Cousins against the blitz. The Cardinals are going to dial it up. They're blitzing in the top 5 rate in the NFL. So if the blitz gets home, Cousins better be wearing his brown pants because it's not going to be pretty, man. So look, if they are able to mitigate it, I don't disagree with Erickson at all. That's exactly how you approach that.
Huge disparity in your guys' rankings for him this week. Erickson has him 5th, which is tied with Joe for the highest among our Fantasy Pros experts. And DBro, as of yesterday, you had him 15th. So the lowest by far, actually, of our Fantasy Pros experts. What's your key matchup in this one, DBro?
Look, we're talking about short passing and giving up yards after the catch. I think that is going to speak to Kyler Murray's wheelhouse. Not only is DeAndre Hopkins going to surpass his 13 points in the no-house advantage over-under challenge, so I'm taking the over with him. But if we had Rondale Moore on the board, I'd be taking the over for him as well. Because the Vikings have given up the 12th most yards after catch this season. Where they struggle is against short passes. Rondale Moore, I think, goes back into the slot this week with Robbie Anderson and more familiar with the playbook, and that is going to be great things for Rondale Moore. In his 2 games from the slot, he's at almost a 25% target share. He's running routes on almost 88% of dropbacks. He is 6th in yak per reception, and Rondale Moore has a history of destroying the secondary. He is going to be an awesome play for people. I've got him currently inside of my top 36 wide receivers. I think he could touch, especially in PPR leagues. And people might be shocked to hear this because he disappeared last week. It's because they put Mighty Mouse on the outside. You don't do that with him. Put him back in the slot, Kingsbury. And I think he's going to crush Shannon Sullivan this week.
DBro, let's move to Raiders at Saints. Talk to me about Davante Adams.
If Davante Adams plays, I know he's dealing with what has been described as an illness. Some reports say he's got a really bad case of the flu. If he goes and he has, Michael Jordan type of flu game this week, it's really easy to see this versus the New Orleans secondary. I mean, come on, guys. They're running out backup corners. Everybody's basically hurt. Bradley Roby's on the IR. Lattimore's probably not going to play this game, so we're going to see him versus the rookie Alante Taylor and maybe a backup safety and Bryce Thompson, or they moved, maybe they moved the ghost of Chris Harris on the outside, which is Davante Adams is going to run circles around him, flu or no flu. So I think Davante Adams is going to have a monster game and fuel Derek Carr to a pretty decent day.
So when you say monster game, you have him 6th right now for the week. Do you think that that's maybe too low? If you think
I think it's too low. And the reason I've had a little bit of trepidation in my ranks is just because of the flu, because of the illness. If we get, he practices in full on Saturday or today, I think I'm gonna raise him into probably my top 2, top 3 wide receiver range.
Erickson, what's your key matchup here?
Looking at the red rifle, Andy Dalton against this Raiders secondary. I think we're going to see some fireworks from both sides of these offenses here. The Raiders defense ranks dead last in fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks, number 1 in passer rating allowed. And if you just look at the QB finishes against this defense, QB5, QB7, QB8, QB3, QB2, QB6. If you need to stream a quarterback this week, Andy Dalton seems like a pretty safe bet to put up at least top 15 production because it's everyone they're giving it up. Last week, Davis Mills put up a top end performance. So I think that Andy Dalton is a great streamer this week. The only concern is, okay, if he throws 2 more pick sixes, do they replace him with Jameis Winston? I don't know, because Jameis Winston would probably do the same thing. And I think too with Chris Olave, I think Chris Olave is ranked too low in the ECR. I mean, this dude owns a 30% target share since week 2. Michael Thomas and Jarvis Landry are not coming back at any point during the season. So Olave is a wide receiver. I think I have him 13 or 12. He needs to be up there. He needs to be in every starting lineup pretty much no matter what.
You have him 15th as of the latest rankings reflected on the site. He's 16th overall for this week. And also, I have to laugh. You think that Jameis Winston should replace somebody who's throwing too many pick sixes? I'm not sure that logic holds up. Let's move to Patriots at Jets. Erickson, I know you want to kind of try and make sense of this backfield now.
Yeah, so I'm looking at Michael Carter, James Robinson against the Patriots run defense. James Robinson has a under-over prop here at 9 fantasy points. I'm not sure if this was established when he was still part of the Jaguars, but I'm just going to take the under and just take advantage of it and just kind of go into the ambiguity of I don't know what his role is going to be, so I'm not going to confidently bet the over on a guy I don't know how many touches or snaps he's going to play in the game. So I feel like it's a pretty safe bet. Unders are usually safer than overs anyway, and I've actually been hitting more unders, and what do you know? I hit 70% of my bets last week, so kudos to me. Love the unders. I'm going under on James Robinson because I think that at least in this week, we should probably see Michael Carter operate as the pretty clear bell cow in the Jets backfield, despite the fact they've talked about, we're going to ride the hot hand approach. Every team says that. So I think that Michael Carter is the guy that you want to start this week if you have him, because this is going to be the week that we probably see the least amount of James Robinson as he's first coming in. Last week we saw Michael Carter, 71% opportunity share, ran a route on 59% of the dropbacks, and that included all of Hall's touches and snaps to start the game. I think the matchup is tough against the Patriots. 7th fewest fantasy points allowed to running backs, 3rd fewest targets allowed to running backs. So I think Carter's still in the RB2 conversation, but the Patriots rank dead last in yards per reception and 30th in DVOA to running backs. So I think for Carter to get there, it does have to be through the receiving game. And even last week, he was really efficient. He had 45 receiving yards, only had 2 catches. So if they do give him targets, we know Corey Davis is not playing in this game. If they feed Carter in the passing game, I think that's ultimately the way that he gets there. So I do like him more in half PPR scoring versus standard, where you're kind of hoping he scores a touchdown. He has gotten goal line work even when Breece Hall's been active, so you can feel confident about that. But this game overall is just kind of, we're not expecting a lot of points. This is the first time. I mean, the Jets haven't beaten the Patriots since 2015. It has been a long time, and to see the spread so close together, as a Patriots fan, I don't really feel confident about the Patriots in this game. I think it's going to be pretty close. So going back and forth, a low-scoring affair. Carter is a back-end RB2 for me.
I'm the only one on this show who's allowed to be a big homer, okay? I'll thank you to not mention your Patriots fandom. Forward. DBro, what's your matchup here?
Yeah, I didn't even go through all my Andy Dalton love with my Saints homerisms here. For this game, I think if the Patriots are going to put up points, I think, yes, okay, they're going to run the ball, all that kind of good stuff. I think it's going to come down to them staying away from the Jets' outside corners. DJ Reed and Sauce Gardner have been elite this year. Fantastic. The entirety of the season. It's going to come down to them feeding Jakobi Meyers, and I don't know who's going to be the quarterback. Apparently Mac Jones is going to start. Who knows? Bill gets a wild hair. Maybe Bailey Zappi makes a return at halftime. We don't know. Nobody knows. But the quarterback, whoever is under center, needs to be feeding Jakobi Meyers. because the cornerback that you attack is Michael Carter on the inside. 73% catch rate, 95 passer rating allowed. Jakobi Meyers is still, he's a stud, guys. I've got him as a top 24 wide receiver. That might surprise people, but if it is surprising to you, you're not looking at the production. He's wide receiver 17 in fantasy points per game. He is 14th in PFF receiving grade, 11th in yards per route run. He is sniffing almost a 24% target share. So, yeah, Jakobi Meyers is in for a really good game.
Let's move to Steelers at Eagles. Last game on the early afternoon slate. DBro, what's your key matchup?
A.J. Brown blow-up game. Pittsburgh secondary has been bad. I mean, we're talking about A.J. Brown. He's due, guys. He's seeing elite volume. Still almost a 30% target share. He's 4th in PFF receiving grade. And despite being 7th in red zone targets, the man only has 2 touchdowns. He's going to have the regression game. It's coming. I think it could be this week against a Pittsburgh secondary that's been beat up, battered. They are 30th in EPA per dropback. They are 32nd in explosive pass rate allowed. It's A.J. Brown season, baby.
Erickson, what are you looking at in this one?
Looking at the Steelers wide receivers against an elite Eagles secondary that ranks 1st in catch rate allowed to wide receivers, 3rd in lowest yards per reception allowed to wide receivers, number 1 in pass defense EPA. They have 3 cornerbacks ranked inside the top 18 per PFF. So it's going to be tough sledding for Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, all of these guys, Chase Claypool, but especially Deontay Johnson because he's the one that's ranked the highest and he's someone that people have been starting. He's wide receiver 65 and half-point scoring over the last 4 weeks. Claypool is wide receiver 44. Pickens is wide receiver 24. So the connection, you can't ignore the connection between George Pickens and Kenny Pickett at this point. He leads the Steelers wide receivers in receiving yards over the last 4 weeks. He's nearly doubled Deontay Johnson's receiving yards in the last 4 games that they've played together. So if I have Deontay Johnson, I'm not playing him this week. He's already shown that he's one of the least efficient receivers in the NFL just based on the quarterback play he's gotten this year. And now he's facing a defense that actually limits receivers to efficient production. So it's really the, whatever the opposite of a perfect storm is, that's kind of happening here for Deontay Johnson. So I would try my best to avoid him this week.
So, Erickson, if you're down on the receivers, do you think that maybe Pat Freiermuth gets some more work and should be ranked highly this week?
Yeah, I think that Freiermuth is definitely he's a top 10 tight end. No, whenever he's been healthy this year, he's seen a very high target share for the Pittsburgh Steelers, whether it's been Kenny Pickett or Mitchell Trubisky. So it really hasn't really influenced how much volume he has seen. And I would definitely point that. I think that's a really good point you bring up, that if the Steelers are going to move the ball, they have been very pass happy with Kenny Pickett. It's probably just because they're all down by so many points that they have to throw the ball a ton. And I think that does benefit Pat Freiermuth.
I would love to take credit for bringing up a really good point, but it was DBro who brought it up in our chat. So, DBro, I'll let you talk a little bit about Pat Freiermuth as well.
I mean, look, I had to bring this up, guys, because the Steelers got to move the ball, right? It's going to happen, right? They got to go up and down the field. I think if that's going to be the case,
happen, to be fair,
it might not. But we look at these matchups and we try to dice up. Okay, what are the weaknesses of a defense? Okay, well, Philly doesn't really have a lot, if any. So if it's okay, we need to stay away from the cornerbacks. Okay, we can't run the ball. Okay, then I think Freiermuth's in for a lot of targets. We've seen this guy get high target shares. We've seen him get bountiful amounts of targets. We've seen him almost touch 80 receiving yards, but no scores. I've got him as a top 5 tight end this week because if Pittsburgh is going to move the ball, I think it's going to have to be through Freiermuth because, Lord help, I don't know how else they're going to do it.
Top 5, 10. Okay, so you really wanted to talk about Freiermuth then if you have him that highly ranked.
I mean, part of this is the state of the tight end position. We've got bad matchups. We've got guys flopping in basically every type of matchup they can come up with. I mean, so saying he's top 5 is not saying a ton. Dallas Goedert's got a bad matchup against the Steelers. I think their cornerbacks are bad, and the wide receivers could really have a day here. But yeah, the only guys that I've got ranked over Freiermuth for the week are, well, it was Mark Andrews. Sadly, that's not going to be great. Zach Ertz, George Kittle, and Tyler Higbee, and that's it.
I mean, Mark Andrews was like on pace for like 30 targets. He
Oh, yeah.
had 5
It was
targets
clear-
on 9 routes.
It was clear they're like, oh wow, we only gave him 2 targets last week and no catches. That's got to change. And they matched that target number and
he was
the
he
first
was
2
on
plays.
pace to smash,
Yes.
but unfortunately he didn't finish the game.
Yes,
Yeah, we
let's
saw
not-
Isaiah Likely, and shout out to Ryan, the meme lord. Okay, everybody needs to bow down for all the tweets out there about like how much fab am I blowing on Isaiah Likely? Oh, likely 80. Everybody needs to give credence to Ryan and say thank you on Twitter to this man for putting this out into the space. You're all welcome because he has fueled all these amazing tweets. So shout out to our social media king here, okay?
Thank you for that, D-Bro. I'll be sure to Venmo you your $20 later for saying that.
It's actually 25, but my price has gone up, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, it is funny. Every time Isaiah Likely does anything, you know you're going to see that meme get reused by all the accounts, which
It was out there
kind of fun.
everywhere last night.
Yes. Let's move to the late afternoon slate. Titans at Texans. Erickson, you teased it earlier. Time to talk about Derrick Henry.
I mean, who else are we going to talk about on this Titans offense but the big dog against this Texans run defense? Derrick Henry this season ranks first in carries per game at 22, fourth in rushing yards per game at 89. The Houston Texans rank last in rushing yards and carries faced this season to running backs. And, we were robbed of the biannual Houston matchup last year because of Derrick Henry's injury. He did not get to play the Texans, but we cannot forget that in Derrick Henry's last 3 games against the Texans, he has averaged not 100 yards, not 150 yards, not 200 yards, 224 rushing yards per game. That's all there can be said.
That's insane.
I mean, this is the most low-hanging fruit of low-hanging fruits we have ever low-hanging fruited on this show.
That's called a Freeman. Thank you very much.
Yes, I mean that like Derrick Henry against the Texans, the ultimate smash spot. So, D-Bro, are you going to take somebody who is so obvious as well?
No, I'm going to go a little bit further down the rabbit hole, and this is why I threw it out there on Twitter, and I tweeted, and I got lovely responses because that's what happens on social media about Philip Dorsett. But I think that if Houston is going to move the ball in this game, it's going to have to be in the passing because Tennessee has been one of the elite run defenses of the NFL. I was high on Davis Mills as a streaming quarterback. I'm back in on that this week. Him going against the Tennessee secondary, who has been terrible. Like, they're top 10 in success rate per dropback. They're top 3 in yards per attempt and passing touchdown rate. They're also 32nd in DVOA versus deep passing. Now, Davis Mills has not gone deep very often this year, but when he has, he's been extremely accurate. He is 6th in deep ball completion rate. So whether you want to talk about Brandon Cooks or my dude Philip Dorsett for the week, I think Davis Mills is going to have a really good game here. So target him as a streamer.
Some small breaking news here. Chuba Hubbard has been ruled out for Sunday's game. I know we already talked about the Panthers, but I do want to quickly ask, how much higher are you guys going to move Dante Foreman in your rankings, knowing that Hubbard isn't going to play? Erickson, currently it looks like you have him 28th.
Yeah, so I started moving him up like slowly, like this week as Chuba Hubbard was not practicing, and this is so annoying because the first report is like, oh, like he could have gone back in the game, and Sheffer says, oh, he's fine, and then now he's like, okay, now he's out. Like, okay, like thanks for the great information. Like, it would have been nice to know like that, like when we submitted our waiver bids. But no, I think that he's got to be in the top 24. So I'm going to move him up, especially because it's a good matchup against the Falcons, and he got the 2-minute work last week, so I think that he'll still be involved in the passing game. They just don't have a lot of weapons on Carolina. We talked about DJ Moore. That's great. But then who else are they going to like feature getting the ball to? Like Terrace Marshall, okay, like he's running routes. Shi Smith has disappeared. They don't really use the tight ends. Tommy Tremble caught 1 pass last week. So, yeah, I mean, Foreman, you're feeling good. You're starting him. If you have him on your roster, like you're starting him this week.
D-Bro, where are you moving him up to?
Live update right now, and I'm kind of curious. We could play a little bit of who would you rather here. I've got Deontay Foreman as a top 20 running back. Like, I've got him right now, right behind Dameon Pierce. And the two names that I'm bouncing between ranking him above, and I have him above both these guys right now. Erickson, tell me, who would you rather play here? Deontay Foreman or Ramondre Stevenson?
I'm playing Ramondre Stevenson.
Okay. I mean, I'm asking because
He
they're going
just
against the
laughed
Jets.
at you.
Who's better? Ramondre Stevenson. It's not even
He
close.
just scoffed at that question.
Okay. I mean, Foreman's going to get how many carries? And how bad is Atlanta on the ground?
How many carries? Ramondre Stevenson has gotten all the touches in the Patriots backfield every single week over the last month. And he's better than Foreman. Like, that's the thing. Like, yes, you can look at the touches, but who's the better running back? Is Ramondre Stevenson. I don't think the touches are that different.
Okay. And who would you rather play here? And this is crazy, but they're taking on the Bills. Would you play Foreman or Aaron Jones? And I know a lot of people say, like, it's low-hanging fruit. Aaron Jones should be the smash, right? But he's going against the Bills. Packers' offenses look terrible. I mean, I really think that Foreman could be in for a day. Like, we're talking about a guy who's going to get 20-plus carries. He's been top 15 in yards after contact per attempt. He's been explosive. He was RB17 last week. We know Carolina wants to run the ball. It's not insane to see 25 carries out of him this week. Would you play Aaron Jones or Deontay
if
Foreman?
Lazard isn't playing, then I'm playing Aaron Jones. It's no coincidence that Aaron Jones had this monster receiving game when Allen Lazard was hurt last week. So I'm going with Aaron, especially with negative game script against Buffalo. Like, I would expect Aaron Jones to eat as a receiver, so I would still start him.
I mean, maybe I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, guys, but I mean, Deontay Foreman, if Carolina wins this game, I mean, regardless, I think he's going to get fed. There's nobody taking work away from him.
I'm with you, DBro. To be fair, I mean, I don't know that I would start him over like an Aaron Jones, for example, but I'm with you that like all signs are pointing to this could be a really great game. I mean, it's also on top of the workload he's getting and the fact that they want to run the ball and the fact that there's no competition for carries. They're also facing the Falcons. I mean, this should be like a pretty excellent spot for him. So I'm definitely with you. Let's move on to Commanders at Colts. DBro, what's the key matchup here?
Again, we're talking about games where teams want to run the ball, and I think that Indy is going to allow them to do that. I love Brian Robinson in this one. I've got Brian Robinson as a top 24 running back, and I get that the box scores have not been amazing, but we're talking about a guy who got 22 touches last week, 86 total yards. He matched his season-high snap count with 47%, and since week 4, Indianapolis has been a run funnel. They have been extremely tough against the pass. They are allowing the 7th highest rushing success rate. They're 29th in rushing yards per game, 26th in explosive run rate. I think Brian Robinson's in for another 17 to 20 touches, and he's going to be a strong RB2 candidate for the week.
Just another quick note. It sounds like teams are calling the Commanders about Antonio Gibson. So if he gets moved, obviously we wouldn't expect that at this point in the week before week 8, but just something to keep in mind for Robinson's value going forward if they do decide to pull the trigger on something like that. Erickson, what are you looking at?
I'm looking at the new Colts quarterback against this Commanders defense, Sam Ehlinger. I think that he could be sneaky in this game. Looking at the Washington football team, as I like to call them, they faced 2 mobile quarterbacks this season, Jalen Hurts and Justin Fields. Those quarterbacks finished as QB2 and QB8 respectively the weeks that they played the Commanders. So what Ehlinger did at Texas, rushed for nearly 2,500 yards, 58 rushing yards per game. More than half of his yardage came after contact. So I think that he brings some grit that I don't think they've gotten from Matt Ryan at the quarterback position. Like, he's going to fight for all these yards. Like, the Colts also don't have any reason to, like, oh, we don't want this guy to get hurt. Like, they can use him as a legitimate battering ram if they so choose. So whether they're running QB power at the goal line. So even if he doesn't necessarily rack up a ton of rushing yards necessarily, I could see him rushing for 2 touchdowns in this game, like in a similar fashion to like a Taysom Hill-esque player. So I think that he scored 33 rushing touchdowns at Texas, 18 of which came on the goal line. So, and even if he's not getting it done on the ground scoring, Washington's defense is allowing the league's highest passing touchdown rate. So they're susceptible through the air. And I think that adding an element of rushing and someone that can move around the pocket and just escape behind this Colts horrible offensive line, Washington can bring pressure. But how do you mitigate that pressure? With a quarterback that can move. So I think that Ehlinger's going to be fun to watch this week, and I think that he's a low-key streamer that I feel kind of good about.
So I agree with you, like in terms of his fantasy value, but in terms of the Colts receivers, how do you think the QB switch impacts guys like Pittman and Campbell and Pierce?
I think that's bad. I mean, overall, I think you're just taking passing volume out of the offense. And I think that's the consensus take, but I just think that it's accurate. Like, the only way I can really see Pittman being, better is if all the targets go to him. Like, you're just totally like neutralizing. Like, there's no Campbell's not getting any targets. Alec Pierce is not getting involved. They're not using the tight ends, and it's just like everything's going to Pittman. He has a 35% target share, and you're getting maybe a little boost in efficiency if Ehlinger is, targeting a little bit more down the field. Now, he doesn't have like a great deep ball, in my opinion. But it's also like when you compare it to like Matt Ryan's deep ball, like it's better than that. So, there may be some hope with Alec Pierce, buying into because remember, Alec Pierce, we were, quote unquote, touting Paris Campbell over Alec Pierce because during training camp, Paris Campbell was running ahead of Alec Pierce. But that also means with the backups, Ehlinger was playing with Alec Pierce. So you could potentially see a connection between those two guys. So I wouldn't try to drop Alec Pierce if I don't have to, just to kind of see how things play out. Paris Campbell, I'm probably the least hopeful of that he's going to be able to come out of this because he really benefited from Matt Ryan throwing the ball like 50 times per game. And Pittman is fringy right now. Like, he's a interesting guy to potentially low ball, but there's also a chance that his value just comes crashing down if, this turns into the Atlanta Falcons, Chicago Bears type of offense where they're just not throwing the ball.
On Pittman, it wouldn't be the first time that a backup comes in and just says, you know what, this guy's clearly the best receiver on the team. I'm just going to throw him the ball a ton. Let's move to 49ers at Rams. What's the key matchup, Erickson?
I'm looking at Christian McCaffrey against the Rams, and I'm actually going to take the under on Christian McCaffrey's prop here at 15 fantasy points. I think it's a lot in half-point scoring. If it was PPR, I'd probably go over here, but I just still have question marks about what McCaffrey's role is going to be in this offense, and it is a tough matchup against the Rams. He's actually played the Rams this year already a couple weeks ago, and he totaled 69 rushing yards, 12 carries. He was efficient, 5.3 yards per carry, and he actually caught 7 of 8 balls for 89 receiving yards, finishing the week as the RB9. Now, if he can duplicate that, okay, then he's going to smash his prop here, and I'm going to look silly, but will be interesting to see how they deploy him. And I think that I probably would change my stance if Deebo Samuel is ruled out in this game, because when the 49ers played the Rams earlier this season, Garoppolo posted a season-low average depth of target at 6 yards, but a season-high in yards per attempt. So basically what they were doing was, all right, let's just check the ball down to our playmakers and let them make plays. So if Deebo is limited, it just makes sense that this would be a game like, all right, let's rev up McCaffrey here in the passing game. And I think they benefit a lot from having a player like McCaffrey, who's already faced this team. He's already faced the Rams defense this year, and this is the second time the 49ers are playing the Rams. So I think there's a cool little element of they can look at that game plan that the Carolina Panthers did with CMC against this Rams defense and implement into their offense. So I do expect CMC to at least be involved a lot as a receiver this week, especially with Deebo being left out. So I think that as a top 10 running back, I think that you feel much better about starting him this week than last week. I mean, he only played 22 snaps last week, and he had 10 touches. So I think that bodes well for his role to grow to like 15, 16, 17 touches this week.
Yeah, just to note, Fitz, Friedman, and Joe have him as a top 6 guy each. You two have him 10th and 12th as of the latest rankings update. So a little bit lower on CMC. DBro, what are you looking at in this one?
Yeah, and I'm going to bump CMC up because I don't think the Deebo plays. So I am going to chase the over for no house advantage over under challenge with this one because of how I'm projecting with Deebo. But again, I mean, come on, guys. We got to talk about Cooper Kupp versus any secondary, all secondaries, San Francisco secondary. He's going to tear up their zone defense. He did it last time. 19 targets, 14 receptions, 122 receiving yards. If the Rams have any shot, and I don't think they have much of a chance, but if they have any shot of winning this game, it's going to have to be on the back of Cooper Kupp.
Let's move to Giants at Seahawks. DBro, you talked about him earlier. Now is your chance. Kenneth Walker.
Kenneth Walker, the man, the myth, the legend. He is that dude. He has been that dude. He always has been and will be that dude. He is awesome. Look, since taking over the starting role, 23 touches a game. He has been the RB8 and RB3. He has been one of the best running backs in the NFL. He's 9th in yards after contact per attempt, 5th in missed tackles forced, and this is despite ranking 29th in carries. So he has been that good. And now he is going to eviscerate a Giants run defense that is 28th in rushing yards per game, 27th in EPA, and oh, look at that. They're 30th in explosive run rate. It's Kenneth Walker week, baby.
He's so good, and he's so fun to watch. It's just like
he's joy. Fantastic. I love Kenneth Walker.
He has very quickly become one of those running backs where he aside from the points he gives you, he's just one of the most fun guys to have on your team. Erickson, what are you looking at in this one?
Looking at Wan'Dale Robinson against this Seattle secondary. It's a good matchup for him in the slot this week because Seattle's been really great against perimeter receivers. They actually ranked number 1 versus perimeter wide receivers this season, allowing the fewest fantasy points per game, but 22nd versus slot receivers. That's because of Seahawks rookie cornerback Kobe Bryant, ranks top 10 in most receptions, yards, and passer rating allowed from the slot this season. And we saw Wan'Dale's usage spike in week 7. He ran a route on 78% of the dropbacks, 6 catches for 50 yards on 8 targets, 28% target share. And a lot of that all came in like the first half. Like, he really didn't play a lot in the second half after kind of limping off the field. He should be healthy and good to go. And I think that in full PPR, like, you're starting Wan'Dale Robinson with confidence because he is the passing game right now for the New York Giants, especially with Seattle locking down the perimeter.
Man, how do the Giants keep winning games with this receiving core? I just don't
coaching,
get it.
Man, coaching matters.
Coaching, it's great coaching. So I certainly they deserve credit for that. Sunday Night Football looks fun on paper. Probably won't be that fun because the Packers stink. Packers at Bills. Erickson, what's the key matchup?
Devin Singletary, baby, against this Packers run defense. Packers have allowed the 4th most rushing yards per game to opposing running backs, and Singletary is a legit bell cow. In week 6, 17 carries, 85 yards, 4 catches for 22 yards on 5 targets, 86% snap share, 67% route participation, 92% opportunity share. Zach Moss didn't even play the last time they played. James Cook had 2 carries. So unless we see this like post bye week rookie bump for James Cook, I mean, Devin Singletary is someone you want to go get in trades because people just don't value him as like a bell cow. I know he doesn't get a lot of the high value opportunities because of Josh Allen, but I mean, this offense scores so many points that Singletary just kind of like falls into some production, especially with playing with a positive game script, which we expect here against a very bad Green Bay defense.
Yeah, you hear a lot of people talk about with the trade deadline coming up, like, oh, the Bills should go after Cam Akers. The Bills should have been in on CMC. The Bills should go after Antonio Gibson. But, like, you're right. Devin Singletary, I think, has looked pretty good, and he has gotten so much of that workload. He's been a really nice value in drafts, from August. DBro, what are you looking at here?
I'm going to sit here and make Bills Mafia happy. My prediction is that they sign Saquon Barkley in the offseason. I've been there, still there. And if it happens, it's going to be they're building an all Madden team. Yeah. But looking at this matchup, I mean, the Packers stink. And if they have any hope of moving the ball in this matchup, Aaron Rodgers is going to have to leave it on Aaron Jones. And it's not a pretty picture, guys. Like, Aaron Jones is RB 12 in fantasy points per game. He is going to have to rip off big runs in this game. He is top 10 in breakaway runs and breakaway run rate. The Bills are 4th in rush defense DVOA. They're 3rd in rushing yards per game. The one small crack in their armor is their 20th in explosive run rate. If Aaron Jones is going to get there, and maybe it's through the passing game, but I think he is going to have to use his explosiveness to the best of his advantage in this one if the Packers have any hope of beating the Bills, and I don't think they have much.
Well, I do think the Bills are going to win this game by like 3 touchdowns. I will say, elite uniform matchup, the Bills versus the Packers. It should look great on Sunday Night Football. Monday Night Football, a pretty ugly uniform matchup. Bengals at Browns. DBro, what's the key matchup?
If the Browns are going to have any hope of moving the ball against the Bengals, and their secondary is fantastic, it's going to have to be on the ground. And this is all Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. I have Kareem Hunt. Both of these guys, I mean, look, we know Nick Chubb, RB1 every single week. Yes, Locke said forget that. But Kareem Hunt's a top 24 back for me. Since week 4, Cincinnati has been terrible versus the run. They're 21st in rushing yards per game, 25th in EPA, 28th in explosive run rate. This all means that Kareem Hunt is probably going to have a really good game here, as well as it's going to filter back to Nick Chubb. Kareem Hunt has not been a bad running back. He's top 12 in juke rate and evaded tackles. So I think if Cleveland wants to win this game, it's going to have to be on the ground.
Erickson, what are you looking at from the Bengals side?
I'm looking at running back Joe Mixon against this horrible Browns run defense. The Browns own the 2nd worst run defense based on EPA this season, allowing league high 13 rushing touchdowns and the 5th most fantasy points overall to running backs this season. And I think it's interesting to point out that Joe Mixon's 2 highest rushing yardage games this season, weeks 1 and 5, came in weeks where the Bengals were without a fully healthy T. Higgins. So we all know that Jamar Chase is going to miss not just this game, but future weeks, up to 7 weeks potentially before he's back to full strength. So I could see Cincinnati, as we've seen before with Zach Taylor, embracing the run game a little bit more. Maybe not to those that have Joe Burrow and on their fantasy teams, but it makes sense just based on the matchup. Like, hey, like we don't need to get away from what would work. Like the Browns can't stop the run. So let's lean on Joe Mixon that we've seen him before. He ranks third in the NFL in touches, 8th in carries per game. And that's why I have Joe Mixon ranked as a top 3 running back this week. I really don't think it's that complicated to think that they'll just feature him. They are missing their best wide receiver on offense. Don't put Joe Burrow out there in harm's way for him to take sacks against Myles Garrett and just run into this defense that has shown it can't stop the run.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Chase because I think we need to talk about some of the impact of this injury just on the other players. And I know that you think that he might be a good value in trades, but for the next several weeks, T. Higgins is wide receiver what? Tyler Boyd is a must-start guy, right? Joe Burrow drops how much? I mean, there's a lot of different moving pieces here that just taking that one chess piece out of the equation kind of changes things for this offense.
Yeah, I think for me, it moves Burrow into like the back-end fantasy QB1 conversation. I just don't think you're going to see like the 30-point weeks as nearly as frequently. I mean, like you just look at the correlation between when Jamar Chase pops off. Oh, what do you know? Joe Burrow pops off too. Like, and then when Jamar Chase doesn't have these massive games, Joe Burrow, low-end QB1 production. So it's not, I need to replace him. You just have to adjust expectations and be like, you're not going to get as many spike weeks from Joe Burrow without, arguably the best wide receiver in the NFL. Like, it's just really, and that's no blame on Burrow. It's just fact. So with T. Higgins, though, I think that he's basically a top 10 guy rest of the season as long as he's healthy. And I think that just moves Tyler Boyd up into the wide receiver too. It's almost kind of like you kind of put Higgins where Chase was doing, you put Tyler Boyd into what T. Higgins was doing, as maybe you take a little bit off the top. So I wouldn't be ranking Higgins in my top 5, but in the top 10, I feel good about him. And Tyler Boyd is definitely a top 24 guy, and maybe top 20 depending on, the matchup here. So I think that, especially with how Boyd has produced over the last 2 weeks, 7 catches, 110 receiving yards, 19% target share. That's what he's averaging. So he's a wide receiver 2 from here on out. And I think Hayden Hurst is also someone you can just continue to stream. He's been productive when Chase has been healthy. So you take him out of the lineup and there are more opportunities.
Smart opportunity to try and buy low on Chase if you're a team that is set to make the playoffs. DBro, how good of a record would you need to have right now to be actively looking to add Chase?
To add Chase, I mean, I would have to have only like maybe you're almost like coasting into the playoffs is what I would look at it. Like, even if your team gets crushed, like you're looking at undefeated, maybe 1 loss, maybe 2, and you're staring out at the landscape of just the rest of the league is struggling. It had to be pretty high, guys, because looking at Chase, we might not see him until legit like the fantasy playoffs. So could he be the difference maker if you trade for him now? Sure. I think there's still some risk, and you still have to get there to get into the fantasy playoffs to use the difference maker. So I think it just depends on team context, but I would have to have a sterling record to be trading for Jamar Chase right now.
Let's very quickly open up the mailbag here to end the show. It's a good time to remind the listeners that if they want even more access to our analysts, be sure to join us on Discord at fantasypros.com/chat. A premium subscription will get listeners full access to our analysts through AMAs, stages, and more. Our question this week, is it time to drop Jahan Dotson? The offense isn't good, and he's not coming back this week. I don't know that that's official that he's not coming back, but it certainly looks really likely that he's not back this week. This is a guy who scored multiple touchdowns early on, was a first-round pick. He has that pedigree and draft capital, looks talented. They have a new quarterback in Washington for the next couple of weeks. Is now the time to move on if you need the space, Erickson?
Yep. You got to move on. He was touchdown dependent. He was not commanding high target share even when he was healthy. He was making off touchdowns. We're seeing Washington run the ball much more than they're throwing it. And look, what I keep in mind with a lot of these receivers and guys I'm like contemplating dropping is it's like a 2-week thing with Jahan Dotson. Like, even if he's active, you're not going to start him. You have to wait to see what he does, and then maybe you'll start him the next week. So it's becoming a cycle of, and then what if he doesn't do anything when he comes back? So when it's these 2-week periods of testing a player and how I feel about them, that's just too much for me. So I'll let him go to the waiver wire. If he has a good week, I'll try to pick him back up, but it's not worth my time and my roster space to hold on to someone that's a fringe receiver 3 on his own team that, like the question said, on offense, that's really not that great.
Debo, quickly, what do you think?
I mean, come on. I'll keep this real succinct, guys. Do we want the wide receiver 3 on a Taylor Heineke-led offense? No.
No.
No. We don't want that. The only way you're keeping Dotson on a roster is if you could stash him in the IR or you're in a keeper league. That's it, period.
Simple as that. Let's wrap it up there, fellas. Thank you both for another awesome episode. Everybody listening, please remember to check out the Betting Pros podcast this season to make sure you're giving yourself the best possible chance to win some money this year. Most of all, thank you, the fans, for listening. For Erickson and DBro, I'm Ryan Wormley. We'll see you again soon.